If you need legal help, then you need Bordas and Bordas, because our goal is to deliver the maximum result for every case we handle. Success speaks for itself. Bordas and Bordas. Our passion is to protect people.
Hi, I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome to this week's edition of the Bordas and Bordas Legal Review. Each week we bring you relevant legal topics and also topics nationally, statewide, and here throughout the Valley. Last week we spoke about the first presidential debate with Wheeling attorney and former national debate champion Chris Regan. Chris is back again this week so we can analyze the second presidential debate. Chris, thanks for coming back on the show.
Great to be here, Jamie.
Well, you know, last week we talked about how Governor Romney performed well in the first debate. Most folks thought he took the evening. And we talked a little bit last week about what the president would need to do this time around to maybe change things so that he would come out on top. And most people feel that he's done that. What are your thoughts?
Yes, last week was a clear win for, 2 weeks ago, I should say, for Governor Romney on presentation and preparation. But President Obama stepped up his game in both areas in the second debate, as I think a lot of people thought he would. He made sure to anticipate the kinds of things that Governor Romney could be expected to say based on his speeches, based on the first debate and where the campaign was. And he developed set-piece attacks because a lot of people observed, particularly fans of President Obama, that it was a very diffident, somnolent performance in the first debate, and he needed to go on the attack and appear much more lively, and that was certainly the case in this second round.
Well, and right out of the gate, President Obama demonstrated to everyone this isn't going to be the same as the first time. He came out swinging, and it showed that this was going to be a different performance. Let's take a look at this first clip.
Candy, what Governor Romney said just isn't true. He wanted to take them into bankruptcy without providing them any way to stay open. And we would have lost 1 million jobs. And that, don't take my word for it, take the executives at GM and Chrysler, some of whom are Republicans, may even support Governor Romney. But they'll tell you his prescription wasn't going to work. And Governor Romney says he's got a 5-point plan. Governor Romney doesn't have a 5-point plan, he has a 1-point plan. And that plan is to make sure that folks at the top play by a different set of rules. That's been his philosophy in the private sector, that's been his philosophy as governor, that's been his philosophy as a presidential candidate. You can make a lot of money and pay lower tax rates than somebody who makes a lot less. You can ship jobs overseas and get tax breaks for it. You can invest in a company, bankrupt it, lay off the workers, strip away their pensions, and you still make money.
You know, Chris, early on there we saw that President Obama was basically saying, you cannot trust what Governor Romney is telling you. You can't believe what he's saying because it's just not true. And that was a theme that kind of began to carry over throughout the night from the president.
One of the most popular lines for President Obama in this second debate was, Governor Romney, that's just not true. Or, ladies and gentlemen, what you just heard from the governor simply isn't accurate. That was a theme. You can't trust Governor Romney. He might sound good, but the facts aren't there to support him. And there were two other themes that President Obama was able to develop in that segment. One was, first of all, the aggressiveness. I want this job. I want to be your president, so I'm willing to go on the attack to show you why you should elect me as your president. And then also, Governor Romney, you're a businessman who has always been in it for yourself. And you want to make yourself and your friends wealthier. That's what's really behind your plan. That's what you've been good at your whole life. And that's what's really going on. He's setting up something with the audience where they won't perceive Romney as like them. They will see him as someone otherworldly who's always been wealthy and that they don't have a lot in common with. And that's good politics.
You know, the other thing that the president did was he appeared to be much more prepared the second time around. Whether he was or wasn't prepared the first time, it certainly didn't necessarily come across that he was as prepared as he could be. And we talked last week about how the president's got a big job. He's got to run the country, not just practice for debates. But his preparation showed, and even with respect to hitting Governor Romney with facts and showing maybe in some instances why Governor Romney had said things in the past that weren't necessarily what he was saying now. One of those areas was on coal, which is very important to people here in the Valley because the coal industry is so big here in the Valley and throughout West Virginia. And that again, happened pretty early on.
It can really pay off. When you know what your opponent is going to say and you've prepared for what he's going to say, then you can deliver off-the-cuff rebuttals that aren't really off the cuff. There's something you memorized ahead of time that you were ready to deliver and are just waiting for your spot. And we've got a great example of that coming up on the issue of coal.
Well, let's take a look at that right now, Chris.
And when I hear Governor Romney say he's a big coal guy, I mean, keep in mind, when you were governor of Massachusetts, you stood in front of a coal plant and pointed at it and said, "This plant kills," and took great pride in shutting it down. And now suddenly you're a big champion of coal.
You know, in that particular clip, the president not only said to the American public, Governor Romney's trying to tell you that he's a coal guy, and he's not, but he also used a specific example of that coal plant in Massachusetts that Governor Romney had talked about. So it seemed like, hey, what the president's saying here is true. He's giving us a specific example, and that could be a great technique in debates as well.
No, that's absolutely right, I should say. I mean, President Obama doesn't know that about Governor Romney. He clearly planned to say that. And so what you see there from a debating point of view is he knew he was going to be attacked on coal, and he simply waited for that moment to reel it in. And he had a piece of prepared speech-making to give that doesn't make Governor Romney look good at all, in particular because it ties into President Obama's theme of you cannot trust this man. He's neither a friend of coal nor someone who can be believed.
Now, you know, despite the fact that most folks thought that Governor Romney had won the first debate, one of the things that people have been critical of Governor Romney about in the first debate was that he wasn't providing much detail about the plans that he was putting forth. That he would say, you know, paint broad strokes about things of, I plan to do this or I plan to do that, but not necessarily providing the details on how he intended to do it. And did a little bit better regarding that this time around, fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing on this Romney tax plan a replay of what's been going on in American politics for almost 50 years now. Some of our older viewers will remember the Nixon campaign and the idea of a secret plan to get us out of the Vietnam War. Well, Governor Romney has been pitching a tax plan that's going to allow him to lower rates and lower the deficit and provide all kinds of goodies to those enjoying investment income. And the big question has been, well, how are you going to do it? He got burned on that in the first debate when the moderator said, well, you just aren't giving us the details. So he tried to give some details in response to one question in this debate.
Well, let's take a look at that clip now so we can see exactly what it is you're talking about.
How about deductions? Because I'm going to bring rates down across the board for everybody, but I'm going to limit deductions and exemptions and credits, particularly for people at the high end, because I am not going to have people at the high end pay less than they're paying now. The top 5% of taxpayers will continue to pay 60% of the income tax the nation collects. So that'll stay the same. Middle income people are going to get a tax break. And so in terms of bringing down deductions, one way of doing that would be to say everybody gets, I'll pick a number, $25,000 of deductions and credits. And you can decide which ones to use. Your home mortgage interest deduction, charity, child tax credit, and so forth. You can use those as part of filling that bucket, if you will, of deductions. But your rate comes down, and the burden also comes down on you for one more reason, and that is every middle-income taxpayer no longer will pay any tax on interest, dividends, or capital gains. No tax on your savings.
You know, Chris, we saw there in that clip Governor Romney providing some additional details regarding his tax plan, but there were still some things that he was leaving out, you know, where he's, you know, picking numbers and saying, let's just say, for example, 25,000. Like he's just picking a number out of the air, and it's not really a part of a plan. Again, more details, but still some missing.
Absolutely. He's giving a little bit of additional detail in order to satisfy, hopefully, some people that there is a real plan behind this tax maneuver that he wants to execute once he's in office. But it's not fully fleshed out. He went a little bit farther in explaining about a deduction cap and how he was going to make those deductions still remain available to lower income people while phasing them out in some ways for upper income people. But that's a work in progress and remains a work in progress. And I think Governor Romney's probably glad there are no more debates where he has to answer questions about the tax plan. From here on out, since the last debate is on foreign policy, he can set his own terms in his commercials.
You know, You mentioned about the last debate's going to be on foreign policy. In these two debates so far have been two different formats, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. The first one, there were two people at a podium with a moderator. This particular debate was a town hall style format, and like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But in classic academic debate, what's the format when you're talking about academic debate as opposed to presidential debates?
Well, in academic debate, the speaking opportunities are a little bit longer. You're not limited to just 2 minutes. Sometimes you're able to speak for 6, 7, even 8 minutes at a time, which allows you to develop your ideas in a little bit more detail. But also, the time limits are rigorously enforced. You cannot go beyond your allotted time whatsoever. The judge is the one enforcing the timeline, and because they can make you the loser of the debate, people are very respectful, obviously, of those time limits. Not so as we see in presidential debating, where the clips are shorter, and the candidates often try to run over the moderator to show that they're in charge of the situation and that they're going to finish their statement regardless of what the rules everyone agreed to may have been.
Another one of the things that was interesting about this debate was that if you look at the two candidates, of course, this is their second time being there with one another. So you get to know your opponent a little bit better and how they may handle things as opposed to the first time going in. And I think that the first time, President Obama was caught off guard a little bit by how aggressive Governor Romney was going to be.
Oh, I think there's no question. One thing you're not used to as the President of the United States is being contradicted to your face by somebody in a close to disrespectful fashion, as Governor Romney has been very tough on President Obama in these debates, and he's not used to that. But I think he was better prepared for it this second time around.
Yeah. Well, we're going to need to take a break here, Chris. When we come back, we'll continue talking about the second presidential debate with wheeling attorney and former national debate champion Chris Regan. We'll analyze some of the things that happened in the latter part of the debate, and we'll also talk a little bit about the third and final debate that is still yet to come. Stay with us in the Bordas Legal Review. I'm Jamie Bordas. Welcome back to the Bordas Legal Review. This week we're speaking with wheeling attorney and former national debate champion Chris Regan about the second presidential debate. Chris, before we took our break, we were talking about and looking at some of the clips from the second presidential debate, and we also talked a little bit about how this style of debate was a little bit different than the first time around. This was a town hall style debate, and how that's different than people being at the podiums and how you try to make a connection with the voters.
That's right. That was quite a story going into the debate in terms of whether or not Governor Romney, who had been portrayed as someone who is too stiff and too awkward to relate directly to voters in that format, whether he would succeed. But since the debate, that story's kind of faded away. We all remember the campaign involving Bill Clinton, George Herbert Walker Bush, and Ross Perot, where then President Bush was looking at his watch, acting very not interested in the voters' questions. And Bill Clinton, of course, being famously good at relating to regular people, scored a clear win in that debate. I think a lot of people thought that Governor Romney might struggle the way that then President Bush did. But that hasn't been the story. He was very successful in dealing with the questions from the audience, appearing reasonable and relatable. That was no difficulty at all. Where he did run into some trouble, though, was when he allowed President Obama to paint him as someone who is not relatable, regardless of how he appeared to be acting during the course of the debate.
Well, and in that regard, Governor Romney somewhat opened himself up to the attack or to criticism from President Obama by asking a question of President Obama. Is that a good idea in a debate to ask a question and give the floor to the opponent?
Well, only under the most perfectly prepared circumstances can you, as a debater, afford to cede the floor to your opponent. You're giving away your speaking time, and you're giving away the floor, the focus of attention, to the other side. If you don't have that situation perfectly under control, and the president's not easy to control, you can be making a huge mistake. After the crushing, quite frankly, it was a crushing victory for Governor Romney in the first debate, I think he was a little bit overconfident. And that led him, in this debate, multiple times to give the floor to President Obama, thinking he wasn't going to be able to do anything with it. And that just didn't turn out to be true.
Well, let's take a look at one of those tactical errors that Governor Romney made in this debate here at this next clip.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension? Have you looked at your pension?
I've got to say.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension?
You know, I don't look at my pension. It's not as big as yours, so it doesn't take as long.
Let me give you some. Let me give you some advice.
I don't check it that often.
So we saw in that particular clip there, Chris, that Governor Romney asked a question of President Obama and almost insists that the president give an answer, almost in a disrespectful way, and he got an answer all right.
Oh, he sure did. I mean, and that's just walking right into it. I mean, the only point Governor Romney wants to make there is that President Obama has some overseas investments too, which isn't a world-class point to begin with. But to try to make it that way and let President Obama get the entire room laughing at you is a disastrous moment. And it just shows, and I'm quite frankly an expert on being a bit of an overconfident debater from time to time, it just shows what that overconfidence can do to you. You put yourself in a position where you think you're in control, suddenly you find out you're not, everybody is laughing, and the point that you want to make is now lost under the cover of a great response by President Obama that, again, paints Mitt Romney as someone who's out of touch, way too rich to relate to the ordinary person. It was an unnecessary, unforced error by the governor there.
Chris, I've known you a long time, and nobody's ever accused you of having a lack of confidence. That's for sure. But you're right. Governor Romney opened himself up there, and it was a mistake, and it allowed President Obama not only to have everyone laughing at Governor Romney, but also to make one of the critical points that you said had been a little bit lost for a while in this campaign, which is that Governor Romney is a wealthy guy, one that's a lot different than most American people, and he allowed not only himself to get laughed at, but also the president to remind people of that critical point that had been lost for a little while in this campaign.
No, I think that's right, Jamie. But we shouldn't be too hard on the governor. I mean, he did not have nearly as bad a night as some of these first clips show. He had some good moments. He continues to be a highly prepared and highly effective debater. His presentation skills are outstanding. That time in the business world has served him well. His time as governor has served him well. And late in the debate, he got the right question for him, a question that allowed him to compare President Obama's promises during the campaign of 2008 with what he's been able to deliver in 4 years as president. That was the moment he was waiting for, and he seized it and enjoyed a really fine moment later on in the debate.
Of course, that's one of the advantages that the challenger has, is that you can attack the record of the incumbent. And let's take a look at this next clip, because that's precisely what Governor Romney attempts to do.
I think you know better. I think you know that these last 4 years haven't been so good as the president just described, and that you don't feel like you're confident that the next 4 years are going to be much better either. I can tell you that if you were to elect President Obama, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get a repeat of the last 4 years. We just can't afford 4 more years like the last 4 years. He said that by now we'd have unemployment at 5.4%. The difference between where it is and 5.4% is 9 million Americans without work. I wasn't the one that said 5.4%. This was the president's plan. Didn't get there. He said he would have by now put forward a plan to reform Medicare and Social Security, because he pointed out they're on the road to bankruptcy. He would reform them. He'd get that done. He hasn't even made a proposal on either one. He said in his first year he'd put out an immigration plan that would deal with our immigration challenges. Didn't even file it. This is a president who has not been able to do what he said he'd do.
In that particular portion of the debate, it almost seemed as though Governor Romney had a chart in front of him saying, you said you do this, but you did this, or you said you do this, but this didn't happen. Pretty effective way of making points.
Oh, there's no question about it. There's no question about it. When you make a bullet point list like that and you're able to prepare it, as I'm sure that was prepared for quite some time by Governor Romney, and then you find the right moment when the questioner leads into something where you can deliver a blow like that, I mean, that was really Governor Romney's highlight of the night. And it's an important one, because those are facts and circumstances that President Obama can't change with better preparation for the next debate, and he can't change them with better presentation skills or more aggressiveness. Those are simply facts that exist. When you've run for president, you probably promised quite a bit. Governor Romney's promising quite a bit right now. But nobody knows whether or not Governor Romney is going to deliver, because he hasn't had a chance to do it yet. But on those things where President Obama hasn't come through, he's stuck with that. And it's definitely dragging him down in these debates and in the election.
One of the things that was interesting about this debate was, because the format was a town hall style, I anticipated, and I think a lot of people did, that there wouldn't be a whole lot of interaction between the two candidates, that most of the speaking will be directed to the person asking the question or the audience or just the American public in general. But there was some serious interaction, not only between the candidates, but also involving the moderator.
Oh, no question about it. These two gentlemen are, let's face it, they're not crazy about each other. And the town hall format does usually lend itself to a more pleasant discussion, focusing on the voters and their questions. But this time, these two men wanted at each other in the worst way. There was a couple of scenes where they circled one another like boxers in the ring, getting in one another's faces, wagging fingers at one another, and you almost get that feeling like the tension is building, almost as though they could come to blows. You know, of course, that doesn't occur. But the moderator also played a critical role, as you mentioned, Jamie, stepping in at a crucial point in the debate and effectively acting almost like a high school debate judge would, deciding an issue then and there between the two men as they debated.
And of course, you know, Candy Crowley was the moderator for this debate from CNN. Jim Lear had handled the first debate and got some criticism for maybe having a little bit of lack of control over the debate. But Candy Crowley not only established control, but she also, as you said, got very active and showed her knowledge of the issues by pointing out to one of the candidates, Governor Romney, that President Obama was right with respect to what he was saying, and Governor Romney was wrong. And was a big point for the president, and one that a lot of people will remember probably.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look at that particular clip.
You said in the Rose Garden, the day after the attack, it was an act of terror. It was not a spontaneous demonstration. Is that what you're saying?
Please proceed, Governor.
I want to make sure we get that for the record, because it took the president 14 days before he called the attack in Benghazi an act of terror.
Get the transcript.
He did, in fact, sir. So let me call it an act of terror.
Can you say that a little louder, Candy?
He did call it an act of terror. It did as well take 2 weeks or so for the whole idea of there being a riot out there about this tape.
You know, Chris, the president had a couple of big moments there with respect to the issue with respect to the attacks in Libya on the American diplomats, and the moderator, Candy Crowley, getting involved was one, but the other was with respect to a clip we'll take a look at here in a minute where Governor Romney tries to claim that President Obama was being political in the aftermath of the attacks on the Americans in Libya, and the president turned it right around on Governor Romney by saying that it was offensive, that he would suggest that.
Yeah, I think it's important for everybody to realize in looking at these debates, Jamie, that they are getting audiences of 60, 70, 80 million people. And every play, I mean, those are Super Bowl numbers. And every exchange can be just as important as a play in the Super Bowl in terms of being able to turn the entire election around. And what happened to Governor Romney when he went on the attack on Libya and didn't have all his facts perfectly at his command allowed him to get a little bit flustered. The moderator stepping in on President Obama's side allowed him to get a little bit more flustered, and it defused the attack and allowed President Obama a fairly devastating counterattack.
Let's take a look at this clip here, Chris.
And the suggestion that anybody in my team, whether the Secretary of State, our UN ambassador, anybody on my team would play politics or mislead when we've lost 4 of our own, Governor, is offensive. That's not what we do. That's not what I do as president. That's not what I do as commander-in-chief.
Well, Chris, what we saw there was kind of emblematic of the evening. Governor Romney would try to make a point, and the president would just turn it around on him and turn it into into President Obama's favor. Pretty good debating there.
That's right. I mean, it's again, the attack wasn't well enough executed, shows a little bit of overconfidence by Governor Romney directly going after the president on a sensitive issue, and not enough preparation to execute it right. And the result is you have one attack where the president gets everybody laughing at Governor Romney, and then this situation where President Obama made a lot of people feel like Mitt Romney looked about an inch tall for what he had to say.
So now we've had 2 debates, and most folks think that Governor Romney won the first one, that the President Obama won the second one. So one left to go, and that one's on foreign policy. Most folks think that should favor the president.
That has been the handicapper's report going in. I'm not sure I believe it. I think that Governor Romney will be intensely well prepared, and he may learn from mistakes in the second debate. He also doesn't face the sky-high expectations he had after cleaning up in the first one. So I think it's going to be a very close debate. I think it's going to be a very close election. These are 2 great debaters. Last time around with John McCain against President Obama, it wasn't a great series of debates to watch. But these are two very intelligent men who have shown great preparation and great presentation. They've got a lot of good people behind them, and I think it's going to be impressive to watch the finale.
Well, Chris, I really appreciate you coming back on the show to take a look at this second presidential debate. Your background and experience as the former national debate champion certainly lends a lot of expertise to this area. So look forward to having you on again next week, where we'll talk about the third presidential debate and see how they did and see which one maybe tipped things in their favor a little bit. So thanks for being here today.
Great to be here, Jamie. Thanks very much.
All right. Well, join us again next week for another edition of the Bordas & Bordas Legal Review. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you then.